The storm
We
came
must
in
proceed
fast
with
that
caution.
October morning.
Caution is
The
a
kind
luxury
that
we
turned
cannot
the Carolina
afford.
Your
coast
haste
into
will be our
something God
undoing.
might have regretted making. Raven Thorn stood on the deck of the Serpent's Cry, rain hammering her face, and watched her husband's body slide into the Atlantic.
I won't let this storm take me!
No ceremony,
Row,
no
damn
prayer,
it, row!
just canvas and iron weights, and the sea
You'll
taking
not
what it
take
always
this
took
treasure!
eventually. She was 28 years old. She'd been married for 6 years. She'd been a
These
widow for
coordinates are
approximately
key
4
to the
minutes.
passage.
The men watched her.
I must be precise.
43 pairs of eyes waiting to see if she'd cry, if she'd collapse, if she'd do what women were supposed to do when the world cracked open beneath them. She could feel their expectation like a hand around her throat. She didn't cry. Instead, she turned to face them. Her hair black as pitch and just as unruly whipped around her face. Her eyes the color of winter oceans swept across the deck. And when she spoke, her voice carried over the wind like it had been doing this for decades. Who wants to leave silence? The kind that meant everyone was thinking about it, but nobody wanted to be first. Edward's dead, she said. I'm not asking you to pretend otherwise. I'm asking who wants to walk away now while you still can. A man near the mainmast shifted his weight. His name was Gideon Cross, oldest hand on the ship, 24 years at sea, most of them violent. He had a scar that ran from his left eye to his jawline and a reputation for settling disputes with his fists before his words. And if we stay, he asked, then you stay under my command, not Edward's ghost, not tradition, mine. You ever captained a ship, Mrs. Thorne? She didn't flinch at the honorific, didn't correct him, just held his gaze until he looked away. No, she said, but neither did Edward before his first voyage, and he learned, same as I will. Another voice younger from somewhere near the stern. The Royal Navy killed Captain Thorne. They'll be hunting us harder now. Every ship in these waters will have our names. They already have our names, Raven said. They've had them for years. The only difference now is they think we're weak. She let that hang in the air for a moment. Let them feel it. We're not weak, she continued. We're wounded. There's a difference. Wounded things fight harder. Wounded things know what they have to lose. The wind shifted. The rain eased just slightly like the storm itself was listening. So I'll ask again, who wants to leave? Nobody moved. Good, she said. Then get back to work. We've got blood to wash off the deck before it stains. She walked past them, boots heavy on wet wood, and disappeared into the captain's quarters. Their captain's quarters now. Hers. Inside, she closed the door, leaned against it. Let her breath out slow and careful the way you let out air when you've been holding it too long and your lungs are screaming. The room still smelled like him. Tobacco and salt, and the particular kind of sweat that came from months at sea. His coat hung on a peg by the window. His charts were spread across the table corners, weighted down with stones he'd collected from beaches they'd never see again. She didn't touch any of it. Not yet. Instead, she moved to the small mirror nailed to the wall, looked at herself. Really looked. Her face was lean, almost gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, a mouth that didn't smile often, and a jawline that looked like it had been carved rather than grown. She had her mother's nose, straight and narrow, and her father's eyes the kind that looked black until the light hit them right and you saw the blue underneath. She was not beautiful. She'd never been beautiful. But she was striking in the way a knife is striking, in the way storm clouds are striking just before they break. She pulled the ribbon from her hair and let it fall loose. It reached the middle of her back, heavy and damp. Then she took Edward's coat from the peg and put it on. It was too big in the shoulders, too long in the sleeves. She rolled the cuffs up twice and buttoned it to her throat. When she looked in the mirror again, she looked like a woman wearing a dead man's coat. She'd fix that. But first there was something she needed to remember. Something Edward had told her once late at night when the ship was quiet and they were alone in this room. I have a sister, she'd said. It was early in their marriage, before the violence became routine, before she'd learned to sleep with a knife under her pillow. Younger. Name's Isla. She left when I joined your crew. Said she couldn't watch me become what our father was. Edward had been quiet for a long time. Then does she know where you are? No, and I want to keep it that way. If something happens to me, she shouldn't be dragged into this life. Nothing's going to happen to you. But something had happened to him instead. Raven touched the mirror's surface, her reflection staring back. Isla would be 25 now, probably in Charlestown, living the respectable life she'd always wanted. Safe, clean, free from the smell of salt and blood. Better that way. Raven turned from the mirror and began studying Edward's charts. She had work to do. The Serpent's Cry limped into Beaufort 3 days later, sails torn, and hull taking water faster than the bilge pumps could handle. They'd need repairs, supplies, time they didn't have. The town sat on the North Carolina coast like something that had washed up and decided to stay. Wooden buildings, salt-stained and crooked, clustered around a harbor that smelled like fish and tar and desperation. It was the kind of place the Royal Navy ignored most of the time, which made it perfect for people the Royal Navy wanted dead. Raven walked the gangplank alone. No escort, no announcement, just a woman in a too large coat with a pistol on each hip and a cutlass that had tasted blood more recently than most men's razors. The harbor master saw her coming and started sweating. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, and it came out like an apology. "Just Thorne," she corrected. "The Mrs. He died with my husband." He swallowed, nodded. "Captain Thorne, then. My condolences. Edward was—" "Where's Calypso?" The harbor master blinked. "The tavern, I imagine. Same as always. Tell her I'm coming." "She'll know already. She always knows." Raven smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Then you won't have wasted your breath, will you?" She left him standing there and walked into town. The drowned mermaid sat at the edge of Beaufort like a bad tooth in an otherwise unremarkable mouth. 2 stories timber-framed shutters hanging crooked, and a sign out front that depicted a woman with a fishtail and an expression that suggested she'd drowned on purpose, just to get away from whoever painted her. Inside, it smelled like rum tobacco and violence that hadn't happened yet, but was thinking about it. Raven pushed through the door and let her eyes adjust to the darkness. The conversations didn't stop exactly, but they changed. Got quieter, more careful. Behind the bar stood a woman who looked like she'd been 50 years old for the past 2 decades and planned to stay that way indefinitely. Calypso Devereaux. Hair the color of iron, face like weathered oak, hands that had strangled at least 3 men, possibly more, though she'd never confirmed the exact number. She was polishing a glass with a rag that looked dirtier than the glass. When she saw Raven, she set both down and leaned forward on her elbows. "Heard about Edward," she said. "Royal Navy, HMS Retribution, Captain Blackwood commanding." Calypso's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Blackwood's thorough. He won't stop with Edward." "I know. So what are you doing here? Should be running. Far and fast." Raven pulled out a chair and sat. The wood creaked under her weight, or maybe it creaked under the weight of what she was about to say. "I'm not running," she said. Calypso studied her for a long moment. Then she reached under the bar and produced a bottle of rum, the good kind, the kind that didn't come with splinters in it. She poured 2 glasses and slid one across. "Stupid," Calypso said. "Probably. Definitely." Calypso drank. "They'll hang you, publicly, make an example. They have to catch me first." "They will. Blackwood's patient. He'll wait you out, cut off your ports, turn your allies by your crew. Then he'll hang you." Raven picked up her glass but didn't drink, just held it, watching the amber liquid catch the dim light from the lanterns overhead. "Edward and I used to talk about what would happen if one of us died," she said. "He always assumed it'd be him first. Faster life," he said. "More risks. He made me promise I'd take the money we'd saved, buy passage to Boston or New York, start over somewhere the Royal Navy didn't care about widows of dead pirates." Sensible man? He was. Raven finally drank. The rum burned going down, which meant it was real. But he's dead, and Sensible died with him. Calypso refilled both glasses without being asked. "So what's the plan?" "Same as before. We raid merchant ships, avoid the Navy, and stay ahead of the noose." "Under your command?" "Yes." "Your crew accept that?" "They haven't mutinied yet." "Yet's doing a lot of work in that sentence." Raven leaned back in her chair. Somewhere in the tavern, a man laughed too loud and someone else told him to shut his mouth. The sound of dice hitting a table, the scrape of boots on wood. "I need information," Raven said. "Navy movements, patrol routes, anything that tells me where Blackwood is and where he's going. That kind of information costs. I can pay when I'm not talking about money." Calypso's eyes were steady. "I help you and make an enemy of the crown. Again, I'm too old to start running from another set of gallows." "Then don't help me." "Didn't say I wouldn't, said it costs." She finished her rum and set the glass down with enough force to make it ring. "I do this, you owe me, not money. A favor. No questions, no hesitation when I call it in." "Done." Calypso raised an eyebrow. "You didn't even ask what kind of favor." "Doesn't matter. You saved Edward's life twice. Figure that buys you at least one favor from his widow." "Thorough woman," Calypso said, and there might have been approval in her voice, might have been. "Blackwood's in Charlestown, refitting after the fight that killed Edward. He'll be there another week, maybe 2. After that, he's hunting, and he's hunting you specifically. Why me specifically? Because Edward's dead and you're not. Because the crown doesn't like loose ends. And because Blackwood's got a reputation to maintain. Calypso leaned forward again. He's the Navy's best hunter. Hasn't lost a target in 7 years. You keep breathing, that record breaks. He won't allow it. Raven stood. The tavern had gone back to its normal noise level, which meant nobody was listening anymore, or they were all very good at pretending. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. You might not survive long enough for me to collect that favor. If I don't, the favor dies with me. Exactly. Calypso picked up the dirty rag and went back to polishing glasses. Try not to die, stupid Thorn. Smart deaths are tragedy. Stupid deaths are just embarrassing. Raven walked out of the drowned mermaid and back into the Carolina sunlight. It was late afternoon now, the kind of light that turned everything golden and made you forget just for a moment that the world was violent and short and nobody got out alive. She didn't forget. That night in the captain's quarters aboard the Serpent's Cry, Raven spread Edward's charts across the table and began to plan. The Carolina coast was a maze of inlets, barrier islands, and channels that shifted with every storm. The Royal Navy knew the major routes, the deep water passages their warships could navigate safely. But there were other routes, shallower, narrower, the kind that required local knowledge and a willingness to risk running aground in the dark. Edward had mapped them over the years, marked them in code, just dots in lines that wouldn't mean anything to someone who didn't know what they were looking at. But Raven knew. She'd sailed with him long enough to recognize his shorthand, his notations, his particular way of marking danger. She traced a finger along the coast from Beaufort to Charlestown, 200 miles of water. Blackwood would patrol the main shipping lanes the route's merchant vessels used. That's where the targets were. But if she wanted to avoid him, she needed to think differently. She pulled another chart, this one newer, showing the waters off the Outer Banks, treacherous even in good weather. Shallow sandbars that appeared and disappeared with the tides. Wrecks from ships that had tried to navigate blind and failed. It was a graveyard. It was also perfect. A knock on the door pulled her attention away from the charts. Enter. Gideon Cross stepped inside, ducking slightly to clear the doorframe. He was a big man built like a barrel with arms, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned early that his size made people nervous. We've got a problem, he said. Just one. We're doing better than I thought. He didn't smile. 3 of the crew left. Took a dinghy after dark. Gone by the time anyone noticed. Raven felt something cold settle in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. Who? Miller, Ashford, young Tom. She knew them. Miller was 40, experienced, good with knots. Ashford was younger, mid-20s, reliable in a fight. Young Tom was barely 16, still learning the difference between starboard and port. Miller I expected, she said. He never liked taking orders from women. But Ashford, Tom, Miller convinced them, told them you'd get them killed. Told them Edward was the only reason this crew survived, as long as it did, and without him we're just targets waiting for the Navy to pick us off. He's not wrong. Gideon's expression shifted just slightly. You believe that? I believe we're in more danger now than we were a week ago. I believe the Navy wants us dead, and they have more ships, more men, and more time than we do. She looked up from the charts and met his eyes. But I also believe running accomplishes nothing. They'll hunt us whether we fight or hide. At least if we fight, we die on our terms. Some of the men aren't sure those terms are worth dying for. Then they should leave. Same offer I made before, no judgment, no revenge, just gone. And if half the crew leaves, Raven straightened, rolled up the charts and set them aside. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter but no less certain. Then we sail with half a crew. We adapt. We survive with whoever's willing to stay. She paused. You thinking about leaving, Gideon? He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sound of water lapping against the hull, the creak of rigging, the distant call of gulls settling for the night. No, he said finally, I'm not. Why, well, because I've been at sea since I was 12 years old. Worked on merchant ships, naval vessels, and everything in between. And the only place I've ever felt like something other than property was here, on this ship, with Edward, and now with you. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the honesty. So no, Captain, I'm not leaving, but I need to know if you've got a plan that's more than just spite and stubbornness. Raven almost smiled. Almost. I've got a plan, she said. Whether it's more than spite and stubbornness remains to be seen. The plan began to take shape over the next 3 days. Raven met with the crew in small groups, never more than 5 or 6 at a time. She didn't give speeches, didn't try to inspire them with grand words about freedom or justice or any of the things captains were supposed to say when morale was low. Instead, she told them the truth. Blackwood's coming for us, probably within the month. We can run and maybe we buy ourselves a few extra weeks, or we can position ourselves where he doesn't expect us and make him regret hunting us in the first place. She showed them the charts, explained the route through the Outer Banks, acknowledged the danger, the risk of running aground, the possibility of storms. This isn't safe, she said. Nothing about this life is safe, but it's a chance, and chances are all we've got. Some left anyway, and 2 more men slipped away in the night, but the rest stayed. 40 crew members now down from the original 43. Not enough to man a warship, but enough to crew the Serpent's Cry and give the Royal Navy a fight they wouldn't forget. Among those who stayed was Eliza Harding, 31 years old, the only other woman aboard, and the best shot with a rifle Raven had ever seen. She'd been at sea since she was 14, running from something she never talked about. Also staying was Marcus Webb, the ship's navigator, 42, thin as a mast with nervous hands that never stopped moving, and Samuel Root, the oldest hand at 63, who'd been with Edward since the beginning. Repairs were finished, supplies loaded, powder and shot distributed. Raven walked the deck one last time before departure, checking rigging, testing lines, making sure everything was secure. As the sun set over Beaufort, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked uncomfortably like fire, she gave the order to weigh anchor. The Serpent's Cry slipped out of harbor on an evening tide, sails catching the wind hull, cutting through water that reflected the dying light like molten copper. Behind them, the town grew smaller. Ahead, the open ocean waited dark and endless and completely indifferent to whether they lived or died. Raven stood at the helm, hands steady on the wheel, and pointed them north, toward the Outer Banks, toward the hunting grounds, toward whatever came next. They reached the banks 4 days later. The barrier islands stretched along the Carolina coast like a broken spine separated from the mainland by shallow sounds and treacherous channels. The water here was different, greener, less predictable. It changed color without warning, from deep blue to pale turquoise to brown where sandbars lurked just beneath the surface. Raven navigated by memory and instinct, using Edward's charts when she could and guesswork when she couldn't. The crew was tense. Everyone knew what happened to ships that misjudged these waters. The wrecks were everywhere, masts jutting up from the shallows like grave markers. But they made it through. 3 days of careful sailing brought them to a natural harbor on the western side of one of the larger islands. It was protected from the open ocean, deep enough for the Serpent's Cry, but shallow enough that Navy warships would think twice before entering. It was also completely uninhabited. Perfect, Raven muttered. They dropped anchor and began the work of making camp. Not permanent. Nothing about this was permanent, but functional. A place to watch the shipping lanes intercept merchant vessels and disappear before the Navy could respond. Gideon came to stand beside her as she watched the crew work. "How long do you plan to stay here?" he asked. "Long enough to make Blackwood come looking. And then we see if spite and stubbornness are enough to keep us alive." He almost smiled. Almost. The first ship they took was a merchant brig out of Charlestown carrying tobacco and rum and correspondence between colonial officials. It wasn't a rich prize, but it wasn't about the money. It was about sending a message. Raven let the crew take what they wanted from the cargo. Tobacco they could trade, rum they could drink. The correspondence she kept. She read through the letters that night by lantern light. Most of it was mundane: trade agreements, shipping schedules, complaints about taxes. But one letter stood out. It was addressed to the governor of North Carolina, sealed with wow and marked urgent. She broke the seal and read. The letter was from Captain Blackwood. He wrote in precise, careful script, the kind that suggested he'd been educated well and took pride in it. He detailed his hunt for the remaining crew of the Serpent's Cry. Listed known associates. Described Raven as the widow Thorne, age 28, presumed to have assumed command of her late husband's vessel and crew. Then came the part that made her pause. "I have reason to believe Mrs. Thorne will not flee. Her actions since Captain Thorne's death suggest a woman driven more by vengeance than survival. This makes her predictable. She will strike at our shipping attempt to draw us into unfavorable waters and rely on local knowledge to compensate for inferior numbers and firepower. I recommend increased patrols along the Outer Banks and authorization to engage any vessel matching the Serpent's Cry's description without warning." The letter continued, but Raven stopped reading. Blackwood knew. Not everything, but enough. She set the letter down and stared at it for a long moment. Predictable. He'd called her predictable, She'd spent 4 days proving him right. The question was whether she could afford to prove him wrong. The next morning, Raven called a meeting. Not the whole crew, just Gideon and two others, Marcus Webb, the ship's navigator, and Eliza Harding. They gathered in the captain's quarters. Raven spread Blackwood's letter on the table. "Read it," she said. They did. When they finished, nobody spoke immediately. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. He was 42, thin as a mast, with nervous hands that never stopped moving. "He knows what we're doing." "He knows what I was planning to do," Raven corrected. "There's a difference." "Not much of one if we keep doing it," Eliza said. She was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She was 31 and had been at sea since she was 14, running from something she never talked about. "He's expecting us to raid shipping lanes." "We raid shipping lanes. We're doing exactly what he wants." "So we changed tactics," Gideon said. "To what?" Marcus's hands were tapping against his leg now, a nervous rhythm. "We're a single ship with a skeleton crew. He's got the entire Royal Navy." "Not the entire Navy," Raven said. "Just a ship stationed in the Carolinas. 3, maybe 4 vessels. And Blackwood can't be everywhere at once." "He doesn't have to be everywhere. He just has to be where we are." Marcus was still tapping. "We're running out of time, out of supplies, out of luck." "Then we make our own luck." Eliza pushed off from the wall. "How?" Raven was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sound of crew working. Voices calling back and forth. The creak of wood and rope. "We stop reacting," she said finally. "Blackwood's waiting for us to be predictable, so we do something he won't expect." "Like what?" "Like going after him directly." The room went very still. Gideon was the first to speak. "You want to attack a Royal Navy warship. I want to make it impossible for him to hunt us. Right now he's got all the advantages. Better ships, more men, supply lines that don't run dry. We can't match that, but we can remove his certainty. By attacking him, by making him afraid." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't make the Royal Navy afraid." "No," Raven agreed, "but I can make one captain afraid. Blackwood's reputation is built on never losing a target. We become the target he can't catch, can't predict, can't stop. We hurt him enough times in enough ways and his reputation starts to crack. And when it cracks, then maybe the Navy decides he's not as thorough as they thought. Maybe they replace him. Maybe they pull resources from the Carolina coast. Maybe we buy ourselves time." Eliza was watching her carefully. "This is about more than survival." "Yes." "This is about revenge." Raven met her eyes. "Yes." "Good," Eliza said. "About time someone admitted it." Marcus was shaking his head. "This is insane. We're talking about deliberately provoking the most dangerous naval commander on this coast." "He's already provoked," Raven said. "Edward's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't collateral damage. Blackwood hunted him, specifically cornered him, and killed him. Now he's hunting me. I'm just deciding to hunt back." Gideon stood and walked to the window, looked out at the water, at the sky, at the horizon where ocean and air became one indistinguishable line. "If we do this," he said slowly, "there's no going back. We cross this line, we're not just pirates anymore. We're enemies of the crown in a way that doesn't end with pardons or negotiations. It ends with nooses or the bottom of the sea." "I know. And you're still willing to do it." "I am." He turned to face her. "Then I'm with you, but we do it smart. No grand gestures, no glory. We hurt him where it costs him most, and we disappear before he can respond." "Agreed." Marcus sighed, a sound like air leaving a corpse. "I think you're all mad, but I've been sailing with mad captains for 20 years. Might as well die under a mad captain I respect." Eliza didn't say anything, just nodded once, sharp and certain. Raven felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close. "Then we start planning," she said. "Blackwood's in Charlestown. We need to know his schedule, his patrol routes, where he's vulnerable. Calypso can help with that." "You trust her?" Marcus asked. "No, but I trust that she wants the Navy off this coast as much as we do. That's enough." They worked through the night, mapping possibilities, identifying risks, building a plan that was equal parts strategy and desperation. By dawn, they had something. It wasn't safe. It wasn't certain, but it was a chance, and chances were all they had. 2 weeks later, the HMS Retribution left Charlestown on routine patrol. Captain Jonathan Blackwood stood on the quarterdeck, hands clasped behind his back, watching the coastline recede to Wanee. He was 41 years old, tall and lean, with the kind of face that looked like it had been designed for command. Sharp angles, no softness, eyes that were pale gray, the color of winter ice. He'd been hunting pirates for 7 years. He was very good at it. The Retribution was his third command and by far the finest. A fourth-rate ship of the line, 64 guns, crew of 400. Fast enough to chase down smaller vessels, powerful enough to destroy them once caught. Raventhorn's ship was neither fast enough nor powerful enough to survive an engagement, which meant she'd run, which meant he'd chase, which meant he'd win. He always won. His first officer approached a young man named Lieutenant Graves, who had the unfortunate combination of ambition and incompetence. "Sir, the patrol route you specified takes us through the Outer Banks approaches. Dangerous waters." "I'm aware, Lieutenant. May I ask why we're deviating from standard patrol?" "Because standard patrol is predictable, and predictable tactics catch predictable prey." Blackwood glanced at him. "Mrs. Thorne is many things. Predictable is not among them. You think she's in the banks? I think she's somewhere we don't expect. The banks are the most logical somewhere. And if we're wrong, then we've wasted time, but if we're right, we end this quickly and efficiently." Graves looked like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. Smart man. The Retribution sailed north. 3 days later, they spotted a ship. Small, single-masted, flying no colors. Blackwood studied it through his spyglass. The vessel was anchored near one of the barrier islands, close enough to shore that the Retribution couldn't approach without risking the sandbars. "Could be a fishing boat," Graves said. "Could be." Blackwood lowered the spyglass. "Or it could be bait." "Sir, send a longboat, 12 men armed. If it's a fishing boat, they can explain why they're anchored in restricted waters. If it's something else, we'll know soon enough." The longboat launched. Blackwood watched it row toward the smaller vessel oars, cutting through water that was too calm, too still. He had a bad feeling about this. The feeling got worse when the longboat reached the ship and found it empty. No crew, no cargo, just an abandoned vessel with sails furled and anchor down. "It's a trap," Blackwood said quietly. "Sir, the men are—" The first cannon shot came from the island. Not the abandoned ship. The island. Hidden behind the dunes and scrub vegetation, someone had positioned a cannon. A small one, maybe a 6-pounder, but aimed perfectly. The shot struck the Retribution's mainmast. Didn't bring it down, but the wood splintered and the rigging jerked violently. "Battle stations," Blackwood's voice cut across the deck. "Recall that longboat and bring us about." But the Retribution was a warship built for deep water and open ocean. Bringing her about in these shallows was slow, dangerous. Another shot. This one hit the hull above the waterline, but close enough to make a point. "Return fire," Graves was shouting, but the gun crews were already moving. The Retribution's cannons roared. The island disappeared in smoke and thunder and the scream of iron tearing through air. When the smoke cleared, the dunes were torn apart. But the small cannon was gone, either destroyed or moved, and the abandoned ship was on fire. Someone had set it ablaze while the Retribution was distracted. It burned bright and fast, oil-soaked wood, catching like kindling, black smoke rising into the afternoon sky. Blackwood watched it burn and felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was deliberate. This was personal. "Damage report," he said. Graves was pale but controlled. Mainmast damaged but serviceable. Hull breach minor. No casualties. "And the longboat?" "Returning now, sir." Blackwood nodded, turned his attention back to the island. Somewhere in those dunes, someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly how to hurt a Royal Navy warship without engaging it directly. Someone who wanted him to know they'd been here. "Set course for Charlestown," he said quietly. "We need repairs." "Sir, if we pursue—" "There's nothing to pursue, Lieutenant. Whoever did this is long gone." He paused. "But they'll make another move. And when they do, we'll be ready." The Retribution turned south. Behind them, the abandoned ship burned down to the waterline and sank. And somewhere on that island, Raventhorn stood in the ruins of the dunes and watched the Royal Navy retreat. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. The Serpent's cry returned to the hidden harbor 3 hours after the Retribution disappeared over the horizon. The crew was alive with something that looked like hope but tasted like recklessness. They'd bloodied the Royal Navy and lived to tell about it. Raven knew better than to let them celebrate too long. She stood on deck as they secured the ship, watching the way they moved. Lighter, faster. The weight of Edward's death hadn't lifted, but it had shifted. They'd proven something to themselves. That they could fight, that they could survive, that they could win. The question was whether winning once meant anything when the enemy had infinite chances to win back. Gideon approached as the last sail was furled. His hands were wrapped in fresh bandages, burned from handling the cannon. He'd insisted on firing it himself, said he didn't trust anyone else to make the shot count. We hurt him, Gideon said. We annoyed him, Raven corrected. There's a difference. The men don't see it that way. The men are allowed to be optimistic. I'm not. Gideon studied her face. You think he'll come back harder? I know he will. We just told Blackwood we're not running. We're hunting. That changes everything. She turned to face him fully. He'll pull resources, call in favors, turn this into a priority instead of a cleanup operation. Then we hit him again before he can organize. No, we disappear. Let him waste time looking for us while we regroup. The men want another fight. The men want to feel like they're not helpless. I understand that, but another fight right now gets us killed. Her voice was firm but not cruel. We won because he didn't expect us. That advantage is gone. Next time he'll be ready. Gideon was quiet for a moment. The sun was setting behind them, turning the water the color of blood and copper. So what do? We move. Find a new harbor. Somewhere the Navy charts don't show. And we wait for Blackwood to make his next move before we make ours. How long? As long as it takes. He didn't look happy, but he nodded. I'll tell the crew. Tell them the truth. We won a battle, not the war, and the war just got significantly more expensive. They moved north following the barrier islands until they found another inlet. This one was narrower, harder to reach, surrounded by marshland that would swallow a longboat whole if you didn't know the safe channels. It took 2 days to relocate. 2 days of careful navigation through water that changed depth without warning and around sandbars that appeared at low tide like teeth. By the time they anchored, everyone was exhausted. Raven gave them 12 hours to rest. Then she called another meeting, this time the entire crew. 40 people crammed into the space between decks, sitting on crates and coils of rope, faces lit by swaying lanterns that made their shadows dance like ghosts. She stood at the front and waited for silence. It came eventually. We hurt the Royal Navy, she began. I want that clear. What we did 3 days ago mattered. Blackwood will remember it. The Admiralty will hear about it. We made a statement. A few murmurs of approval. Someone near the back said something about making the bastards pay. Raven let it settle before continuing. But statements don't win wars. And make no mistake, we're at war now, not just with Blackwood, with the entire colonial naval presence. They won't let this stand. They'll escalate, which means we need to be smarter, faster, and more careful than we've ever been. Or we could hit them again, someone called out. Raven couldn't see who. Keep them off balance. We could, and we'd be dead within a month. She let that land. Blackwood's strength is patience. He'll wait. He'll watch. He'll position resources until there's no move we can make that doesn't end with us surrounded. Our only advantage is unpredictability. We lose that by being aggressive for the sake of aggression. Eliza spoke up from her position near the starboard side. So we hide. We prepare. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like one. No, Raven agreed. It doesn't. But feelings don't keep us alive. Strategy does. Another voice, older, belonging to Samuel Root, who'd been with Edward since the beginning. How long do we prepare? How long do we sit in this swamp waiting for Blackwood to make his move? As long as it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Raven's voice was steady. I know you're tired. I know you want this finished. But rushing gets us killed. Patience gives us a chance. A chance at what? Root again. We can't win this. Not against the Royal Navy. Best we can hope for is survival. And survival means running eventually. Then run, Raven said simply. I meant what I said before. Anyone who wants to leave can leave. No judgment. Take a dingy road ashore, disappear into whatever life you can make. I won't stop you. The space went very quiet. But if you stay, she continued, you stay because you believe there's something worth fighting for beyond just survival. Edward believed it. I believe it. And I think most of you believe it too, or you wouldn't still be here. She looked around at their faces, weathered, scarred, some young, some old, all of them carrying the particular weariness that came from living outside the law. This ship is the last place in these waters where the crown doesn't decide who you are, she said. Where your past doesn't matter, and your future is whatever you make it. That's rare. That's valuable. And yes, it might get us killed, but at least we'll die as ourselves. Nobody moved. Nobody left. After a long moment, Gideon stood. We stay, but we need more than speeches. We need a plan that goes beyond wait and see, Shum. Agreed. Raven had been expecting this. which is why tomorrow we start gathering intelligence. Calypso has contacts throughout the coast. We need to know Navy movements, supply schedules, patrol routes. We can't fight blind. And if Calypso can't get us what we need, then we find another way. We adapt. It's what we've always done. The meeting broke up slowly. People drifted back to their duties or their bunks, conversations continuing in low voices that Raven couldn't quite hear. She stayed where she was, watching them go. Eliza approached once most of the crew had left. That was well said. It was necessary. Both things can be true. Eliza leaned against a support beam. You believe what you said about this ship being worth dying for? Yes. Even if we lose. Especially if we lose. Because losing while fighting for something is still better than winning by giving up everything that mattered in the first place. Eliza smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Edward used to say things like that. Never could tell if he meant it or if he just liked how it sounded. Both, Raven said. He meant it and he liked how it sounded. They stood in silence for a while. The lanterns swayed. The ship creaked. Outside, night had fallen, completely turning the world into darkness and distant stars. I'm going ashore tomorrow, Eliza said finally, to Beaufort, to see Calypso. I should be the one to go. No, you should stay here and keep the crew from falling apart. I'll handle Calypso. She doesn't know you. She knew Edward. That's close enough. Eliza pushed off from the beam. Besides, if Blackwood's looking for you, the last place you should be is anywhere predictable. Let me take the risk this time. Raven wanted to argue, wanted to insist, but Eliza was right. Be careful, she said instead. Always am. Eliza left before dawn, rowing a small dinghy toward the mainland through water that was black and still as oil. She carried a pistol, a knife, and a letter from Raven to Calypso, written in code they'd used back when Edward was alive. It took her 6 hours to reach Beaufort. The town looked the same as always. Crooked buildings, salt-stained wood, the smell of fish and tar hanging in the air like something that had died and been forgotten. She tied the dinghy to a dock that probably belonged to someone but currently wasn't being used. Then she walked through streets that were just waking up, past merchants opening shops and fishermen heading out for the day's work. The drowned mermaid sat exactly where it had always been. Eliza pushed through the door and let her eyes adjust. Calypso was behind the bar, same as always, polishing a glass that would never be clean no matter how much effort she put into it. She looked up when Eliza entered. No recognition, no surprise, just a steady gaze that said she'd been expecting this. You're one of Thorne's, Calypso said. Eliza Harding. I remember. You shot a man in here 3 years ago, over a card game. He was cheating. Most people cheat. You're one of the few who does something about it. Calypso set the glass down. You here alone? Yes. Brave or stupid? Haven't decided yet. Calypso almost smiled. What do you need? Eliza crossed to the bar and placed Raven's letter on the counter. Calypso picked it up, broke the seal, read it slowly. When she finished, she folded it and tucked it into her apron. She wants a lot. She's willing to pay. Not talking about money. Neither is she. Calypso poured 2 drinks without asking if Eliza wanted one, slid one across. The Navy's looking for her hard. Blackwood's put a price on her head. 500 pounds for information leading to her capture. Dead or alive, though they'd prefer alive so they can hang her publicly. 500. Eliza let out a low whistle. That's more than they offered for Edward. Edward was a pirate. Raven's an insult. The crown doesn't like being embarrassed. Calypso drank. I can get you what you're asking for. Patrol schedules, supply routes, but it'll take time. How much time? A week, maybe 2. We don't have 2 weeks. Then you'll have to make do with what I can get you in 1. Calypso leaned forward. But understand something. The more I dig, the more attention it draws. People notice when someone starts asking questions about Navy movements. Eventually, those questions get back to the Navy. Can you be careful? I'm always careful, but careful has limits. Eliza finished her drink. Do what you can. We'll work with what we get. Tell Raven she's playing a dangerous game. She knows. Does she? Or does she just think she does? Calypso's eyes were sharp. There's a difference between knowing you're in danger and understanding what that danger actually costs. Edward understood. I'm not sure Raven does yet. She's learning. Let's hope she learns fast enough. Eliza left the tavern and walked back through Beaufort's streets. The sun was higher now, the day warming up, people going about their business like the world wasn't balanced on the edge of something violent. She was halfway back to the docks when she saw them, Royal Navy, Three men in uniform walking with the kind of purpose that said they weren't just passing through. One of them was an officer mid-20s with a face that hadn't learned yet that authority and respect were different things. They saw her at the same moment she saw them. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the officer smiled. "You there, stop." Eliza kept walking. "I said stop." She stopped, turned slowly, kept her hands visible and away from the pistol at her hip. "Can I help you?" she asked. The officer approached. The other two flanked him, hands on their weapons, but not drawing them. Yet. "We're looking for a woman," the officer said. "Name of Raven Thorn. Perhaps you've heard of her." "Can't say I have." "No, strange. She's quite famous in these parts. Widow of a dead pirate. Commanding his ship now, or so we're told." "Sounds interesting, but I'm just passing through." The officer studied her face. "What's your name?" "Anne." "Anne what?" "Just Anne." "Everyone has a last name." "Not anymore." His smile didn't falter, but something changed behind his eyes. "You're armed." "Lots of people are armed. It's a dangerous coast." "Indeed it is." He stepped closer. "Where are you coming from?" "North." "Where north? Does it matter?" "It might, if you're traveling with certain parties." Eliza kept her expression neutral. "I travel alone." "Then you won't mind if we search you?" "I would, actually." That wasn't a request. One of the other men moved to her left, the third to her right, flanking positions. They'd done this before. Eliza calculated odds. 3 against 1, all armed. In the middle of a street where people were starting to notice and move away because nobody wanted to be near when the Navy started asking questions. She could fight, probably kill one before the others reacted, maybe 2 if she was lucky, but then she'd be dead and Raven would never get the intelligence they needed. So she didn't fight. She stood very still and let them search her. They found the pistol, the knife, and Raven's letter. The officer opened it, read it. His smile turned into something uglier. "Well," he said softly, "this is interesting." Raven knew something was wrong when Eliza didn't return by nightfall. She stood on deck and watched the mainland looking for the small dinghy that should have been rowing back across the water. The sun set, the stars came out, the dinghy didn't appear. Gideon found her there an hour after full dark. "She might have just decided to wait until morning," he said. "No, she would have sent word." "How?" "She would have found a way." Raven's voice was tight. "Something's wrong. Maybe Calypso needed more time." "Maybe." Raven didn't believe it. "Or maybe the Navy found her." "You can't know that." "I know Eliza. She's careful, cautious. If she's not back, it's because she can't come back." Gideon was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go ashore and find out what happened." That's exactly what Blackwood would expect. You go looking for her, you walk right into whatever trap he's set. Then I walk into it. Raven turned to face him. "I'm not leaving her." "You might have to." "No." "Raven, oh, no." Her voice was firm, final. "We don't leave crew behind. That was Edward's rule. It's mine too." Edward's dead because of rules like that. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a cannon shot. Raven's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very cold. Edward's dead because Blackwood hunted him, not because he cared about his crew. And you'll be dead for the same reason if you're not careful. Then I'll be dead, but I won't be someone who abandons people. She pushed past him toward the captain's quarters. "Get the crew ready. We're going ashore at first light." "That's suicide." She stopped, didn't turn around. "Then don't come." She went below deck before he could respond. The letter arrived 2 hours before dawn. A small boat approached the Serpent's Cry single occupant, rowing slowly and carefully, like someone who knew they were approaching a ship full of armed pirates and didn't want to get shot. The watch challenged them from the rail. The voice that answered was young and scared. "Message for Captain Thorne. From Beaufort. I was paid to deliver it." They brought the boat alongside and hauled the messenger aboard. He was maybe 16, thin as a mast, with hands that shook as he handed over the sealed envelope. Raven took it. "Who paid you, man in a Navy uniform?" "Officer. Said to deliver this and nothing else." She broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was precise and careful, the same handwriting from Blackwood's letter she'd intercepted weeks ago. It read, "Captain Thorne, I have one of your crew, Eliza Harding, age 31, arrested on suspicion of piracy and conspiracy. She will be tried in Charlestown in 3 days. The trial will be brief, the verdict predetermined, the sentence carried out immediately. You may prevent this. Present yourself to the Royal Navy garrison in Beaufort by noon tomorrow. Surrender your ship and crew, accept arrest. Miss Harding will be released. Fail to comply, and she hangs. You have my word, as an officer of His Majesty's Navy, that should you surrender, your crew will be treated fairly and according to law. The choice is yours. Captain J. Blackwood, HMS Retribution. Raven read it twice. Then she handed it to Gideon, who'd appeared beside her. He read it, swore quietly. It's a trap, he said. Obviously. You surrender, they'll hang you both. Probably. So we don't surrender. Raven was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the crew was waking up, drawn by the commotion. They gathered in small clusters, watching, waiting. Finally, she looked at the young messenger. Tell Captain Blackwood I'll give him my answer in Beaufort. Tomorrow, noon. The boy's eyes went wide. You're going? Tell him what I said. They put him back in his boat and sent him rowing toward shore. Raven watched until he disappeared into the darkness. Then she turned to face her crew. All 39 of them, because Eliza wasn't here. You heard, she said. Blackwood has Eliza. He wants me in exchange. Nobody spoke. This is his move, she continued. The one I said he'd make. He couldn't find us, so he's forcing us to come to him. Smart, efficient, exactly what I would do in his position. So we don't go, someone said. We don't surrender, Raven corrected. There's a difference, we were in. Gideon stepped forward. What's the plan? I go to Beaufort, alone, meet with Blackwood, hear what he has to say. That's suicide. Maybe, or maybe it's an opportunity. For what? To see how confident he really is. Raven's eyes swept across the crew. Blackwood thinks he's got me trapped. He thinks I'll either surrender to save Eliza, or I'll abandon her and prove to everyone that I'm exactly the kind of captain who doesn't deserve loyalty. Either way, he wins. So how do we make him lose? Raven almost smiled. By doing neither. I don't surrender, but I don't abandon Eliza either. You can't have both. Watch me. She left at dawn rowing the same dinghy Eliza had taken the day before. Alone, despite Gideon's protests, despite offers from half the crew to come with her. This had to be her. Just her. The water was calm. The sky was clear. It was the kind of morning that made you forget the world was violent. Raven didn't forget. She reached Beaufort just before noon and tied the dinghy to the same dock Eliza had used. Then she walked through streets that seemed quieter than usual, like the town itself was holding its breath. The Royal Navy garrison sat on the north edge of town. Small building, stone walls, flag flying from a pole that needed paint. 2 guards stood outside. They saw her coming from 100 yards away. By the time she reached the door, an officer had appeared, the same one who'd arrested Eliza. He looked pleased with himself. Captain Thorne, he said, punctual, admirable. Where is she, Inside, unharmed as promised. I want to see her. You will. Captain Blackwood is waiting. They led her through a narrow hallway and into a room that might have been an office once, but now served as an interrogation chamber. Small table, 3 chairs, window barred from the outside. Blackwood stood by the window. He turned when she entered, and for the first time Raven saw the man who'd killed her husband. He was tall, lean, somewhere in his early 40s with a face that looked like it had been designed specifically for giving orders. His uniform was immaculate, his boots polished. Everything about him suggested control. Mrs. Thorne, he said, it's Captain. Of course, my apologies. His voice was measured, careful. Please sit. I'd rather stand. Then stand. He moved to the table and sat himself. Your crew member is in the next room, unharmed as I promised. Would you like to verify? Yes. He nodded to the officer who'd escorted her in. The man opened a door and gestured. Eliza appeared, hands bound, face bruised but expression defiant. She saw Raven and something like relief crossed her features. I'm fine, Eliza said before anyone could ask. Don't do anything stupid. The officer pulled her back and closed the door. Raven turned her attention to Blackwood. You wanted to talk. Talk. Straight to business. Efficient. He leaned back in his chair. I respect that. Very well. I'll be direct. You're finished, Captain Thorne. Your ship is outmatched. Your crew is small. Your resources are limited. You hurt me once, I'll grant you that. But once is all you'll get. From this point forward, every move you make brings you closer to the noose. And yet here I am, free, walking into your garrison. Doesn't seem like someone who's finished. No, he agreed. It seems like someone who values her crew more than her own life. Admirable, but ultimately irrelevant. He stood and walked to the window again. I'm offering you a chance to end this cleanly. You surrender. Your crew stands trial. Some will hang. Most will serve time. A few might even earn pardons. But they'll live. That's more than you can offer them otherwise. And me, you'll hang publicly in Charlestown, as an example. Generous. It's practical. You're a symbol now. The crown needs to demonstrate what happens to symbols that challenge authority. He turned to face her. But your crew doesn't have to die with you. That's the offer. Raven was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sound of gulls, distant voices, the normal sounds of a town that didn't care about this conversation. If I refuse, she asked, then Miss Harding hangs in 3 days, and I dedicate every resource at my disposal to hunting you until you're caught or dead, preferably caught. I'd like the pleasure of watching you hang. Honest, I appreciate that. I've found honesty saves time. Raven walked to the table, placed both hands on it, and leaned forward slightly. Here's my counteroffer. You release Eliza, now, unharmed, and I don't burn every ship you have anchored in Charlestown Harbor. Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You're bluffing. Am I? You don't have the resources to attack Charlestown. I don't need resources. I need timing and fire. She smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Ships burn beautifully when they're anchored close together, especially when someone's placed oil-soaked rags in the right locations. And Charlestown Harbor is very crowded these days. You're insane. No, I'm committed. There's a difference. Blackwood stared at her. You wouldn't. Your entire reputation is built on never losing a target. Imagine what happens when the Admiralty learns you lost an entire harbor to a single woman with a boat full of pirates. She straightened. Release Eliza, or I burn everything you've worked 7 years to build. The room was very quiet. Finally, Blackwood spoke. You know I can't release her. The arrest is on record. There's a trial scheduled. To release her now would require explanation I can't provide. Then get creative. Even if I could, what's to stop you from attacking regardless? My word, same as you gave me in your letter. The word of a pirate. The word of a captain. Raven's eyes were steady. You don't have to like me, Blackwood. You don't have to respect me. But you know I keep my promises. Edward did, I do. Release Eliza, and you have my word I won't touch Charlestown. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing, calculating. You're asking me to choose between protocol and pragmatism, he said finally. I'm asking you to choose between your reputation and your pride. One you can rebuild, the other you can't. Blackwood turned back to the window, looked out at the town, at the sky, at nothing in particular. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, harder. You win this round, Captain Thorne. Miss Harding will be released. The arrest will be reconsidered. A clerical error, perhaps. Mistaken identity. Thank you. Don't thank me. This isn't mercy, it's strategy. He faced her again. You're more valuable as a target than as a martyr. So I'll let you leave. I'll let your crew member leave, and then I'll hunt you properly. With patience, with resources, with everything the Royal Navy can bring to bear. I look forward to it. You shouldn't. Probably not, but I do anyway. The door opened. Eliza was brought in, hands unbound. Now the ropes cut away. She crossed to Raven's side. We're leaving. We're leaving. Blackwood remained by the window. Captain Thorne, one more thing. Raven paused at the door. Your husband was a good man, Blackwood said. Misguided, criminal, but honorable in his way. I regret his death even though I caused it. I want you to know that. You want absolution. No, I want you to understand that this isn't personal. It's duty. Duty to what? The crown, the law, your reputation. All three. Raven nodded slowly. Then understand something in return. When I kill you, it won't be personal either. It'll be survival. And survival doesn't care about honor. She left before he could respond. They rode back to the Serpent's Cry in silence. Eliza's hands were shaking slightly, though whether from fear or anger or relief, Raven couldn't tell. Probably all three. When they reached the ship, the crew erupted. Questions, shouts, hands reaching down to pull them aboard. Raven let them celebrate. Let them believe this was a victory. But she caught Gideon's eye across the deck, and she saw that he understood. This wasn't a victory. This was a delay. Blackwood had let them go, which meant he had a plan, something bigger, something that required her alive and free to walk into. The question was what, and how long they had before it sprang shut. The news reached them 4 days later, carried by a fisherman who'd rowed out to their hidden harbor with information he'd been paid to deliver. Blackwood had called in reinforcements, not just one ship. 3. The HMS Valiant, the HMS Steadfast, and a smaller frigate called the Hawk, all experienced crews. All captained by men who'd made their careers hunting pirates along the American coast. Combined with the retribution that made 4 Royal Navy warships dedicated to finding one small pirate vessel. Raven read the fisherman's report twice. Then she paid him what she'd promised and sent him on his way with instructions to forget he'd ever been here. When he was gone, she called the crew together. They gathered on deck in the afternoon heat, sweat already soaking through shirts, faces grim because they'd all heard the rumors by now. 4 ships. The Navy was done playing. Raven stood at the helm and looked at them. 39 people who'd stayed when they could have run, who'd fought when they could have surrendered, who'd believed in something she still wasn't sure she could deliver. "You've heard," she said. No preamble, no softening. 4 warships, hunting us specifically. Blackwood's committed everything he has to ending this. Silence, the kind that felt heavy. "I'm not going to lie to you," she continued. "We can't win a direct engagement. 4 ships against 1, we'd last maybe an hour, probably less." More silence. "So we have 3 options," Raven said. "We run, we scatter, or we fight smart." Gideon spoke up from his position near the mainmast. "Define fight smart." "We can't beat 4 ships, but we can make it impossible for them to coordinate. The Carolina coast is 300 miles of inlets, islands, and shallows. They have to patrol all of it. We only have to disappear into the parts they can't reach." "Guerrilla tactics," Eliza said. "Exactly. Hit supply lines, burn their resources, make this coast so expensive to hold that the Admiralty questions whether it's worth the investment." Marcus Webb, the navigator, shook his head. "That's a long game. We don't have the supplies for a long game." "No, but we have contacts. Calypso can help, so can others. And if they won't, then we adapt." Raven's voice was firm. "But I'm not running, and I'm not surrendering. So if anyone wants to do either of those things, now's the time." Nobody moved. Samuel Root, the older hand who'd questioned her before, finally spoke. "How long do you think we can last?" "Honestly, I don't know. A month, maybe 2 if we're careful. And then we'll have hurt them enough that the next crew has a better chance." Root let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "You're asking us to die slow instead of fast. I'm asking you to make every day we survive count for something." He was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "I can live with that, or die with it. Same difference." A few others murmured agreement. Not everyone, but enough. Raven felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, not quite, but something close. "Good," she said. "Then we start moving, tonight. We head south away from where they expect us. Find new harbors, new targets, and we make Blackwood regret calling in those reinforcements." They moved that night, sailing under minimal sail to avoid being spotted. The darkness was complete, no moon. Just stars that gave enough light to navigate by if you knew what you were looking for. Raven stood at the helm, hands steady on the wheel, feeling the ship respond to current and wind. This was the part she'd always loved about sailing. The quiet, the solitude, the sense that you were small and the ocean was infinite, and somehow that made everything else feel manageable. Eliza joined her sometime after midnight. "Can't sleep?" Raven asked. "Can you, William?" "No." They stood in silence for a while. The ship creaked. Water rushed past the hull. Somewhere below, someone was singing, voice low and slightly off-key. "Thank you," Eliza said finally, "for coming after me. Your crew. I don't leave crew behind." "You could have. Would have been smarter." "Probably," Raven adjusted the wheel slightly, correcting for a shift in the wind. "But smart isn't always right. Edward used to say things like that. He was right more often than he was wrong." Eliza was quiet for a moment. "Do you really think we can win this?" "No." The honesty seemed to surprise her. "Then why fight?" "Because losing while fighting is still better than losing without trying. And because," Raven paused, searching for words, "because someone needs to prove that the ocean doesn't belong to whoever has the most ships. It belongs to whoever refuses to give it up. That's not how the world works." "I know, but maybe it should." Eliza smiled, though it was sad. "You sound like him." "Good. He was worth sounding like." They sailed south until dawn, then anchored in a narrow channel between 2 barrier islands. The position was defensible, hard to approach, easy to escape from if needed. Raven gave the crew 8 hours to rest. Then they started planning. The first target was a supply depot, not a major one, Just a small storehouse the Navy used to stockpile provisions for patrol ships, salted meat, hardtack, gunpowder, rope. Essential supplies, but not heavily guarded. They hit it 3 days later, just after sunset. 12 people, no more. Enough to overwhelm the 2 guards stationed there, but not so many that they couldn't disappear quickly afterward. Raven led them herself. They rowed ashore in 2 dinghies moving quietly through water that was black as ink. The depot sat 50 yards from the beach, a wooden structure with a single lantern burning outside. The guards were drinking, not heavily but enough that their attention had wandered. Raven's group surrounded the building, waited for the signal. When it came a bird call that wasn't quite right, they moved. The guards didn't have time to draw weapons before they were disarmed and bound. No one died. That was important. Raven had been clear, avoid killing unless absolutely necessary. Dead guards meant escalation. Captured guards meant embarrassment. They took everything they could carry, burned the rest. By the time the fire was visible from the main road, they were already back in the dinghies rowing toward the Serpent's Cry. They reached the ship an hour before dawn, unloaded the supplies, weighed anchor, and moved to a new position before sunrise. No casualties, no mistakes, just a clean operation that hurt the Navy's logistics without giving them a target to retaliate against. It felt like a victory, small but real. They hit 3 more targets over the next 2 weeks, another supply depot, a patrol boat anchored overnight in a supposedly secure harbor, a courier ship carrying dispatches between Charlestown and the northern garrisons. Each time they struck fast and disappeared faster. Each time the Navy's response got more aggressive. Patrols increased, garrisons were reinforced. Rewards were posted for information leading to the Serpent's Cry's location. But Blackwood couldn't be everywhere, and the coast was too large to control completely. Raven knew it wouldn't last, knew that eventually Blackwood would adapt, would tighten the net until there was nowhere left to hide. But every day they survived was a day the Navy spent chasing ghosts, and every target they hit was a message: we're still here. The message from Calypso arrived on the 16th day. A small boat, single occupant, a young woman Raven didn't recognize. She came aboard with a sealed letter and instructions to wait for a reply. Raven broke the seal and read, "Thorn Blackwood's changing tactics. Stopped trying to find you, started trying to force you out instead. He's targeting civilians now. Anyone suspected of helping you. Arrests, interrogations, public trials. 3 people hanged in Beaufort yesterday, fishermen, accused of supplying information to pirates. No evidence, no defense, just rope and a crowd. He's making an example, showing what happens when people help you. You need to stop, or this gets worse." Calypso Raven read it twice, then handed it to Gideon. He read it, swore quietly. "He's targeting innocents," Gideon said. "He's targeting leverage." Raven's voice was cold. "He knows we need local support. He's eliminating it by making it too dangerous to help us. So what do we do?" "I don't know." It was the first time she'd admitted it out loud. Gideon looked at her, and for a moment she saw something that might have been fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for her, for what this was costing. "We could stop," he said quietly. "Disappear. Let things cool down. People are already dead. Stopping doesn't bring them back." "No, but it might prevent more deaths." Raven was quiet for a long time. Around them the ship rocked gently. The crew went about their duties unaware of the conversation happening at the helm. Finally she looked at the young woman who'd delivered the message. "Tell Calypso I need to meet with her. In person. Tomorrow night. She picks the location." The woman nodded and left. Gideon waited until she was gone before speaking. "What are you planning?" "I'm going to end this." "How sociable?" "The only way left. Directly." Calypso chose an abandoned church 5 miles inland from Beaufort. Raven arrived alone despite protests from the entire crew. The church was small, wooden, slowly being reclaimed by the forest that surrounded it. The roof had partially collapsed. Vines grew through the windows. Calypso was waiting inside, sitting on a pew that looked like it might collapse under her weight, but somehow held. "You came," she said. "You asked. I suggested. There's a difference." Calypso stood. "You read my message." "Yes. And I can't keep doing this, not if it means civilians die." "Good, so you'll stop." "No, I'll finish it." Calypso studied her face. "You want to go after Blackwood directly?" "Yes." "That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's also the only move that ends this without more innocent people dying. You kill Blackwood, they'll send someone worse." "Maybe, but that's a problem for later." Raven moved closer. "Right now, Blackwood's the threat. Remove him and maybe the Navy backs off long enough for us to disappear properly. Or they escalate and hunt you even harder. They're already hunting us as hard as they can. At least this way I'm choosing the terms. Calypso was quiet for a moment. You know this is revenge, right? Not strategy. Revenge. Both things can be true. They can, but revenge gets people killed. Usually the person seeking it. I know. And you're doing it anyway. Yes. Calypso sighed. It was the sound of someone who'd seen this play out before and knew how it ended. What do you need? She asked. Information. Blackwood's schedule. Where he'll be and when. And then I make a choice, his life or mine. Clean, simple. Nothing about this is clean. No, but it can be simple. Calypso reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. He's in Beaufort. 3 days from now. Inspecting the garrison, public appearance, lots of witnesses. Perfect. It's the worst possible time to try anything, which is why he won't expect it. Raven took the paper, studied it. The schedule was detailed. Times, locations, security arrangements. This is good intelligence, she said. It cost me 2 favors I can never call in again. Calypso's eyes were hard. Don't waste it. I won't. And Thorn, when this is over, if you survive, you're done. No more raids, no more attacks. You disappear, and you stay disappeared. That was our deal. I remember. Good. Calypso walked to the door, paused. Edward was my friend. I helped him because I believed in what he was doing, building something that wasn't controlled by kings or merchants or anyone who thought they owned the ocean. She turned to look at Raven. I'm helping you for the same reason. But if you get yourself killed for revenge, everything he built dies with you. Remember that. She left before Raven could respond. But Raven didn't go to Beaufort alone 3 days later. She went back to the ship, called another meeting. This time, just Gideon, Eliza, and Marcus. Blackwood will be in Beaufort in 3 days, she said. Public inspection. I was planning to go alone. Kill him. End this. Was planning, Gideon caught the past tense. Calypso's right. If I kill Blackwood, they'll just send someone else. Maybe someone worse. And all those civilians will have died for nothing. So what changed? Eliza asked. I remembered something. Raven unfolded a different map, one of the southern coast. I have a sister, Isla. She's in Charlestown, living a respectable life, safe from all this. She looked up at them. If Blackwood's in Beaufort, he's not in Charlestown. His ship isn't there. Most of his resources aren't there. It's the best chance I'll ever have to get her out. If you're going to evacuate your sister. Marcus's hands were tapping nervously. While Blackwood's waiting for you to try to kill him? No, I'm going to let him think I'm coming for him. While I'm actually getting the last person I care about away from this war. Raven's voice was firm. Then we disappear. For real. All of us. Cater to different ports. Start over. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. You're giving up. I'm choosing survival. There's a difference. Edward would never. Edward's dead. Raven's voice was sharp. And I'm not going to let more people die, crew or civilians, or my own blood for a fight we can't win. The room was very quiet. Finally, Eliza spoke. I'll come with you to Charlestown. No, you'll take the ship south. Split the crew. Half with Gideon, half with you. If I'm not back in 4 days, you assume I'm dead and you run. And you'll be where, getting my sister, then disappearing. Blackwood will think he won. Let him. It wasn't a glorious plan. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even particularly satisfying. But it might keep everyone alive. But plans like ships don't survive first contact with the enemy. Raven made it to Charlestown, found Isela working at a textile shop, living quietly exactly as she'd hoped. They met in a back room. Aula was 25, now still had, their mother's face still had that look of disapproval when she saw what Raven had become. You need to leave, Raven said. Tonight, there's a merchant ship heading to Boston. I've paid your passage. Why? Because the Royal Navy is hunting me, and eventually they'll find out about you, and they'll use you to get to me. Isla was quiet for a moment. So this is goodbye. This is me keeping you safe, from a life you chose, from consequences you don't deserve. They stared at each other, years of distance between them, different choices, different lives. I'm sorry, Isla said quietly, for leaving, for judging you, don't. Raven's voice was soft. You made the right choice. You got out. You're safe. That's all I ever wanted. They hugged, briefly, awkwardly. Then Isla left for the docks, and Raven turned to leave Charlestown. But Blackwood was waiting. He'd never been in Beaufort. The schedule Calypso provided was false. Bait. Blackwood had fed false information through his own networks, knowing it would reach Raven eventually. While she thought he was in Beaufort, he'd positioned his entire fleet around Charlestown, waiting. Raven saw the ships when she reached the harbor. 4 of them, surrounding the docks like a noose. She could run, disappear into the city, hide. But then they'd search, they'd question, they'd find Isla. So instead she walked down to the docks, openly, hands visible. Blackwood was waiting on the pier. "Captain Thorne," he said, "predictable after all. You laid a good trap. I learned from my mistakes." He nodded to his men. They moved to surround her. "You're under arrest. Piracy, murder, conspiracy against the crown." "I haven't murdered anyone. Legal distinction. The hangman won't care." Raven looked past him at the ships, at the crew, at the overwhelming force. She could fight, kill maybe 3 men before they killed her, or she could surrender. Buy time, hope for a miracle. She chose surrender. "One condition," she said. "You're in no position to negotiate. My crew, you leave them alone. They're already scattered, no longer a threat. You've won. Let them fade away." Blackwood considered this. "Very well, I have what I want. Your crew is irrelevant." They bound her hands, led her onto the Retribution, below deck, into a cell that smelled like salt and rot. Blackwood visited her there that night. "Your trial is in 3 days," he said through the bars. "It will be brief. The verdict is already decided." "I know. You'll hang in Charlestown, publicly. The crown wants everyone to see what happens to pirates." "I understand." He was quiet for a moment. "Why did you surrender? You could have run." "I was tired of running." "No, that's not it." Blackwood's eyes were sharp. "You were protecting someone who, Raven said nothing. "It doesn't matter," he said finally. "In 3 days you'll be dead, and this chapter will be closed." He left her in the darkness. But Raven's crew didn't scatter. When she didn't return, Gideon and Eliza made a choice. They gathered what was left of the crew, 39 people, and they made a plan. A stupid plan, a desperate plan, but it was the only one they had. The day of Raven's execution, Charlestown was crowded. The gallows had been erected in the main square. Hundreds of people gathered to watch. The Royal Navy made sure of it. This was a spectacle, a message. Raven was let out in chains, her hands bound, her face calm. She'd made her peace. Blackwood read the charges. The crowd listened. Some jeered, some watched in silence. The noose was placed around her neck. And then from the harbor, an explosion. Huge, deafening. One of the Navy ships, the HMS Steadfast, erupted in flames. Chaos, people screaming, running, Navy officers shouting orders. And in the confusion, Gideon and Eliza appeared in the crowd. They moved fast, cut through the guards, cut Raven's bonds. "Run," Gideon said. They ran, through the crowd, through the streets, toward the docks where the Serpent's Cry waited, sails already raised. Behind them, Blackwood's voice screaming orders, guards chasing. But the explosion had created enough chaos, enough time. They reached the ship, scrambled aboard. The Serpent's Cry pulled away from the docks just as Navy soldiers reached the pier. Blackwood stood there, watching his face frozen in fury. Raven stood at the helm, breathing hard, and looked back at him. Their eyes met across the water. She raised her hand, not in triumph, not in mockery, just acknowledgement. One warrior to another. Then she turned the ship west, toward the open ocean, toward freedom. But freedom had a kitten. The Navy pursued them, hard, for 3 days. They used every trick, every shallow channel, every hidden cove. But 4 ships against 1 meant eventually they'd be cornered. It happened at dawn on the 4th day, trapped in a bay, nowhere left to run. The Navy fleet surrounded them, cannons aimed. Blackwood's voice carried across the water. "Surrender now and I'll make it quick." Raven looked at her crew, 39 people who'd given everything for a dream that was dying. She could surrender, save their lives, accept the noose, or she could choose how this ended. She chose. "Below deck," she said quietly. "Everyone. Now." They didn't understand, but they obeyed, all except Gideon. "What are you doing?" he asked. "What I should have done from the beginning." She moved to the gunpowder stores. 4 barrels. Enough. "Raven, get off this ship, Gideon. Take a dinghy. Row away, fast." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." Her voice was firm, final. "Someone needs to remember this. Remember us. Tell the story." His eyes widened. No, it's not a request. She physically pushed him toward the rail. Eliza was already there holding a dinghy rope. Get him off this ship, Raven said. Eliza understood. She grabbed Gideon. Together with Marcus and Samuel, they forced him into the dinghy. He was shouting, fighting, but they lowered him into the water anyway. The remaining crew followed, one by one, into dinghies, into the water, until only Raven remained. She stood on the deck of the Serpent's Cry and looked at the Navy fleet. Then she went below, set the fuses, came back up, and waited. Blackwood saw what she was doing, too late. Pull back, he screamed. Pull back now. But ships don't turn quickly. The explosion tore the Serpent's Cry apart. Fire and thunder and wood flying like shrapnel. The blast wave hit the nearest Navy ship, the Retribution, hard enough to crack the mainmast. By the time the smoke cleared, the Serpent's Cry was gone. Just debris and fire on the water. Blackwood stood on his damaged ship, searching the wreckage. No body. No sign of Raven. Just the ocean, taking what it always took. The historian's name was James Whitmore. He was researching colonial naval records in Charlestown when he found something odd. A report filed by Captain Jonathan Blackwood in 1714 describing an engagement with a pirate vessel called the Serpent's Cry. The report was detailed, professional. It described the pursuit, the trap, the final confrontation. But at the end there was a note, handwritten, not part of the official record. It read, Captain Raventhorn was never found, body never recovered, presumed dead, though I suspect she wouldn't want to be presumed anything. She was the most dangerous opponent I ever faced, not because of her ship or her crew, but because she refused to accept that some battles can't be won. The ocean is safer without her, but it's also less interesting. The note was signed and dated J. Blackwood, 1714. Below it, in different handwriting, someone had added years later, she lived, I saw her, 10 years after Charlestown, in Boston. Different name, different life, but same eyes, same way of standing like she was on a shop deck, even on solid ground. I didn't report it. Some people earn the right to disappear. Gideon Cross, 1724. Whitmore included both notes in his book, Naval Operations in Colonial America, published in 1789. The book was largely ignored, but it survived. And 200 years later, a graduate student found it in a library basement and started asking questions. Who was Raven Thorn? Why did the Royal Navy spend so many resources hunting one pirate? And why did Blackwood, a man known for thoroughness, let her disappear? The student never found definitive answers, but she did find something interesting. A grave in Boston, unmarked, but with a small stone placed nearby so weathered it was almost unreadable. She knelt down, brushed away dirt and lichen, and read, The Ocean Remembers. And beneath that a name that might have been Raven or Raina or something else entirely. The carving was too worn to be certain, which was probably the point. The student took a photo, published her findings in a small historical journal. The article was titled, The Pirate Queen of Carolina Separating Legend from History. It concluded that Raven Thorn was likely a real person, that she commanded a ship in the early 1700s, that she fought the Royal Navy and may have survived, but the details were too scattered, too contradictory, too worn by time. All that remained for certain was this: someone fought, someone refused to surrender, someone made the Royal Navy remember that the ocean belonged to no one, and that was enough.